Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to be doing part 2 of this little red-eyed tree frog with watercolor pencils. If you didn't catch part 1, I will link it down in the description below. This is the last part of my watercolor for beginners series, so I'll go ahead and link part 1 where I went over all of the supplies that I like to use for my watercolor pencils, and part 2, which is the techniques that I like to use with them. And then in part 3 here, we're putting all of that together and we're doing an artwork. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. I went over all of the supplies that we're using in part 1 of this painting tutorial. But I'm just going to grab my kneaded eraser real quick here, and I'm just going to lighten a few of the sketch lines in the frog here. Now I will have the line art and the reference photo and my color swatches available for you guys, so check that out down in the description if you want to paint along with me. But I'm just going to lighten a couple of these lines real quickly. And then once we get our frog done here, it'll be easier to go back and judge the other areas and decide whether we need to make anything darker or layer up or anything like that. So I think I'm going to start with his eye first here. So I'm going to grab Pale Geranium Lake number 121. And I'm not going to bother too much with this little spot in his eye right now, this little slit. Because it is pretty dark, so it will go over the reds after. So I'm just going to work on the red part of his eye right now. And I'm just going to fill this area in. And again, I'm using a pretty light hand, just enough for the color to lay down. And I do have a little circle here for a highlight, but we'll come back in afterwards and put our highlights in. And I'm also going to take this over here on the side where I can see his other eye kind of popping out. Now this one's a little bit darker over here. Okay. I'm going to go and grab the Indian Red 192. This is just a little bit more of a browny red. And I'm going to kind of use this for this lower part here and just a little bit around the edges of the eye to kind of start giving it that 3D look where it's a little more rounded. And again, I'm still not pushing very hard with any of the pencils, especially my watercolor pencils. I never push hard because they just show up so well on their own. Even with my colored pencils, I tend to not really push that hard. I'm going to get a little bit of this color in the middle here just to start indicating that area. I'm going to grab my Indanthrene Blue 247, and I'm going to use this around the red area, just where I can see the blue coming around the eye. Now, if you're worried about when you go ahead to blend these out that they're going to mix together, You can always mix, like blend out your red area first, then once it dries, come back in with the blue. But I'm not too worried because the area between the blue and the red is pretty dark. So if it happens to go a little purpley, that's totally fine. It's just going to make it look darker, more like the reference photo. Now for part of the frog, I do have my pencils a little bit more sharpened than normally, just because the areas here are a little bit smaller. So I usually say you don't have to worry about having your watercolor pencils, you know, as sharp as you would for your colored pencils, because they lay down really nicely. However, when you do have smaller areas like this, you kind of do want to have them a little bit sharper. Then I'm going to go ahead and grab my warm gray 6 275, and I'm going to use this on top of those darker areas just to help them stand out a little bit more. So I'm sort of going just on the lower quarter of the eye in sort of a round shape here. And I'm going over the blue as well. And I'm taking this right between the red and the blue as well, just darkening that area a little bit. And then I'm going to grab that Indian red and put this in over here as well. So I'm pretty much going to cover up the whole area with this Indian red too. And then I'm going to go in with the warm gray 6. And I'm going to kind of focus this more towards the outside of the eye and down here, and just try to leave a little tiny bit of lightness more towards the green area. But it's definitely going to be darker than the other eye. So we'll go ahead and blend that out right now and just see how that's looking. So I'm going to take my water brush for this. You can use whatever brush that you have. And I like to just activate it on the paper towel there. Then I'm just going to go ahead and blend this out. So I'm sort of being careful to kind of try to stay in the red area first. Get that activated. And then I'll come and pass over the blue. And I may need to come back in and add some more of that dark color to it, but at least this gives us a little base layer for now. Okay. So we'll let that dry for now. And I'm going to start working on his body right now. So because I didn't put a lot of water down around him, his eyes, I can kind of work around it. If you have, then you can go ahead and dry that real quick. But I'm going to take this cream 102 and I'm going to focus this down here in this more like tanny area underneath his mouth and on his little like chest area. I'm just trying to get a nice flat layer in here of this color. And it sort of comes down on his arm just a little bit here underneath where the blue part would be. And I'm going to take just a little bit of it just above his lip here. So I'm just looking where I can see this color, sort of around some of his eye here. And we'll come in and clean up the eye afterwards with another layer, or maybe even a couple more layers, because I do want his eye to be nice and bright and saturated. Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and take my Nugget 178 and sort of in this area where we can see a little bit more shadow coming, I'm just going to glaze this color over and kind of right underneath his like little chin mouth area here. You can see a little bit of this color, a little bit of it on his little mouth area there. And I'm not bothering with any of the little spots or anything right now that we can see, because if we put those in and then blend this all out, those are going to blend out anyway. So I'm just focusing on sort of like the main flat colors right now. So that's good for there. And I think I'm going to start getting some yellows in. So I'm going to take this Naples yellow 185, and I can see just a little bit more bright yellow just right in here under his lips. I'm just going to get a little bit in there. And then there's also quite a bit of yellow around here where the blue is, so I'm going to start getting that in as well. And actually I'm going to take this Nugget and just get this little spot right here. It's also got some yellow there too, but it's more of like a browny kind of yellow from the shadow, so that'll help that. And then I'm just trying to kind of follow where I can see this color. These red-eye tree frogs really do have some pretty colors in them. Some nice vibrant colors as well. So I'm just filling in this pattern and still not pushing hard, just enough for the color to show up. Because once you blend your watercolor pencils out, they do go a little bit darker than what the color is. Some of them will go a little bit darker than some of the other pencils, but they do blend out just a little bit darker than how you lay them down. So whenever I say I'm glazing a color over, I'm doing it very, very light, and I don't want to lay it down as opaque as something like this, because then once I blend it out, I don't want it to overpower the color that's already laid down underneath, like the base color. I just want like a hint of that color coming over top of it. All right, and I can see a little bit of this color down in some of his little feet areas here, so I'm going to get this in as well. And then I'm just going to sort of fade it off once I get to the leg. Just a very light hint of like a yellowy undertone on some of his toes. Over here I can see just a little bit peeking through. So I kind of tend to work in sections, but like all over that section. So I'm kind of working all over the frog at this point. And I'm just laying in, so like I can see little hints of like yellow underneath some of the areas. And it's basically from the sun, like kind of hitting on some of the areas. So I'm just laying this color down in there where I can see it. Maybe I'll just glaze a little bit here on his back. Just the more back side, like this top side here. So I'm holding my pencil back a little further, so I'm not putting as much pressure, and I'm really just trying to like just get this pencil to glide over the surface. I really don't want too much color down. So if you can see the difference from here to there, that's sort of what I mean when I say glazing. I just want like a very light layer of it, because you can always go back and add more of that color. But it's kind of hard like to layer it up and then realize that's too much yellow. Then you've got to layer up way more green, and then it might end up being a lot darker than you originally wanted. So less is always more to start with. And I'm just hitting a few of the areas where I see it a little bit more yellowy. Okay, so I think that's where I'm going to leave that pencil. Then I'm going to take this Cadmium Yellow Lemon 205. This is like a very light yellowy green. So I'm going to use this on his back here as well and get this down. And again, I'm just doing a very light layer. And I think it's really, I don't really know if I have to use this color too much because we went around with some of that Naples yellow, so I think I'll kind of skip that color. And I'm going to go in with the 170. This is May Green. So this is just a little bit more green. And I'm going to start getting this on his head here. And I'm basically going to fill in all of the green areas with this color. And then we can always go and adjust and add shadows or whatever we need to, but this will sort of be like our base layer. So I am going to sort of take my time here and really get a nice smooth base layer down because our frog is our focal point. So I want a little bit less texture in the frog than in, you know, our background elements. And I'm going right over the brown and the yellow areas. Now I'm kind of stopping where like the crease of his mouth is, because it's a lot more like yellowy and brown underneath. But if we need to glaze some of the green over afterwards, we can certainly do that. I'm going to fill in his back as well. And I'm going to avoid this yellow area. So again, I'm doing more like little oval circles, more of like how I would use my colored pencils to get a nice smooth layer. And I find this just so relaxing, just coloring in areas, you know. And then the fun parts, once you get all the base layers down and you can kind of go in and start working on the detail and really make it pop. And you can really focus on the detail as much or as little as you like. So it depends, you know, how detailed or how loose you would like your artwork to look. And everybody has different preferences. So that's the fun thing with art. We could all work on the same reference photo, and more than likely everyone's artwork would come out a little bit different. I'm going to throw this color down on his arm here as well. Oh, and I just noticed I didn't quite go over this area with the warm gray, so I'm actually going to get that in right now. And I'll just blend it out so it kind of crosses over his little thumb there. I guess that's a toe finger. I don't know. And I'm just going to blend that out real quick, trying to avoid the green that I just laid down. There we go. And then we'll just carry on with this May green. And I'm just going to grab that Naples yellow and just add a little bit, kind of coming up the back of his leg here. I can see a little bit in there. So I'm being careful around where I just laid that water down there, but that's why I love these water brushes, because you can just be so controlled and can really work right around the area. And I'm just bringing this green down into some of the yellow here. Actually, I'm going to take my Perfection eraser here. So this is the Faber Castell Perfection eraser, and this has actually got like a little gritty sanded end to it, and it works really well with colored pencils, but it also works really well with watercolor pencils. And I just noticed here that this area should be a little bit skinnier, so I'm just going to erase some of the watercolor pencil here, because we should have a little bit more of like a blue, that light blue area coming in there. So I'm just going to erase a little bit of this. Now I don't want to push too hard because this is sort of sanded. You can end up ripping your paper. And depending if you're using a non-cotton paper, so this is 100% cotton, so it's pretty hardy paper. It's the Arches hot press paper. So you can get away with quite a bit of scrubbing on this in the cold pressed. However, if you're using, you know, not the greatest paper like a CANSON XL paper or something like that, it will lift up much easier than this paper will. So just be aware of that and maybe test it on a spare piece of paper just to see how much scrubbing you can get away with. But there, it's a little bit less thick than what I was going with. And then as it comes out, it does get a little bit thicker. So for some of you, this might be the more boring part, but it's really important to get a nice foundation down, because then the more we layer over top, the more solid our colors become and the more realistic it looks. So, you know, really take your time, especially for your main focal points in your artwork, because that's where you want people's eyes to go. So I tend to, you know, maybe I'll do the backgrounds a little bit quicker or whatever, but then I really tend to take my time on my main focus. And now we've got a little bit of the blue coming along here too, so I want to remember to leave some space for that. Okay. Same thing over here. I'm leaving some space for that blue. And I might do a little bit more of that 205, the cadmium yellow lemon, on this leg, just because it is quite a bit more yellow and bright than the other legs. And I think it's just because the sun's sort of hitting this area a little bit more. So I'm just going to lay a light layer down like that, and I might just do a little bit more just on the top part of his back here, just while I have the pencil in my hand, because I really want that color to come through there. Then I'm going to go back with that May Green 170 and just keep filling in. So when I want to be a little bit more precise, I am holding the pencil up closer, but I'm definitely not pushing any harder. So if you notice me holding it up here versus back here, I'm still trying to be as light-handed as possible. It's just definitely much easier when you're holding it back there, and especially for bigger areas. This color kind of comes down on either side of the yellow there. Okay. So I think I'm going to grab my 151 right now. This is the Helio Blue Reddish. And I think I'm going to get, I think I'm just debating if I want to blend out first and then go in with the blues, just so that it doesn't smudge. And I might do that because, well, no, I think I'll put it in and then we'll just blend everything out together. Because if it does smudge a little bit, there is like the hint of green kind of around here as well. So blue and yellow are going to make green, but I think we can kind of get away with it. So I'm just going to get this color around here where I can see it. Now, if it was a very stark difference between them and you couldn't see that hint of green around them from the blue reflecting on the yellow, then I would probably do it separate. If you're using a bigger, like just regular watercolor brush, you could definitely do it separate as well. But I'm just going to go ahead and blend everything out at once. So I'm kind of just going around some of the edges and then just filling in. Now I'm just looking to see where this ends and our lighter blue begins. Kind of comes up into like that kind of a shape, the little triangle end. Then we've got some of our lighter blue. Might extend it just a little bit. Now we've got some more like shadowed areas in here, but I feel like trying to blend those out like in the eye, they're just going to blend right out right away. So we'll come back in with another layer. Do you see some of this dark blue coming along between the lighter blue and this like cream area here? I can see a little bit in here in the crease in the leg. Just creating a little bit more of a rounded shape there because I can kind of see it like coming around and more rounded and attaching to the leg there. And there's just a little bit over here. And I think that's where I'll leave that color. Then I'm going to grab the lighter blue, which is the Phthalo Blue 110. I'm going to put this in the other light blue areas that I can see. I have brushes over there drying and they're rattling from moving the table around, so I do apologize if you guys can hear that. So our frog is slowly coming together. All right, I'm gonna go in and put the orange in. So I've got Orange Glaze 113, and this is gonna go all over his feet. So I'm gonna take this over that yellow, the Naples yellow that we put down as well. And I'm just hoping that that yellow will just kind of lightly show through. And I feel like once we get this yellow down, he's really gonna look more like a red-eyed tree frog, because I feel like their orangey feet are, you know, pretty prominent. Same with their eyes, but I'll do another layer on their eyes as well, or on his eyes. So I'm bringing that orange over that shadow area as well. Now, if you've got to move your paper around to get into certain areas, I tend to like just move my hand around. Definitely go ahead and do that. I just tend to tape my paper down so that it stays in one area so I can zoom in so you guys can really see what I'm doing, but don't feel like you have to do that. You can definitely, you know, move your paper around as you need to. So I'm taking just a little bit more of the orange in the shadow areas just so it really kind of shows through. But again, it's going to be more toned down, which is what we're going for. And I think somebody's just starting to mow their lawn outside, one of the neighbors, so I do apologize if you guys can hear that. But I kind of want to get our little frog buddy done here. So I may just end up trying to talk a little bit louder if it gets too loud. And I'm just going to go back in with that cream color here. Just under his mouth area. And I think I am going to grab a little bit of the nugget and just lightly glaze that color over here too. But not as much as over here. There is a little bit more shadow right under the blue, so I'll get that in. And then I'm going to take this color and shadow the bottom part of the yellow here. So again, I'm just glazing that color over top. And then a little bit up some of these, like little branches in between the blue where I can see a little bit of shadowing. And I think I'm going to blend this part out, and then actually no, I want to go in and just add another layer of our red here. So this is the Pale Geranium Lake 121. So I really want his eye to pop. And then I will dry everything, and then we'll come back in with our shadows and our details. And I'm just coming back in with that Indanthrone Blue 247. And just coming right around the edge there. And then I'm going to go ahead and just blend everything out. So I'm just lifting a little bit if it got too much onto the red area there. And then I'm just going to start blending. And I love this orange glaze color. It's definitely one of my favorite colors. I use it quite a lot. So I'm going to focus on the orange right now, and then I'll come back and blend the green and everything else. Because it's got a little more defined areas. I'll blend this yellow part though, where it kind of gets into the green. And maybe I'll just blend the green now. Why not? So again, I just wipe the tip off there when I want to kind of soften that color or blend it lightly into other colors. I'm going to leave the blue for right now, and I'll just focus on the orange and the green. And then back to the orange here. I'm going to blend this yellow area out. And I'm going to try to get around the blue as best I can. And I'm going to blend under his little mouth and chin area here. And I may need to even come in and darken that up just a little bit more, and we can use that warm gray after to do that. And there's a little bit more shadowing like under the eye and stuff that we can come in and get. just gonna activate it a little bit more. I'll do this back part here. Then I'm going to come through and do the blue areas. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and dry this thoroughly, and then we'll be back to do some more shadowing, some details, and then finish him up. Okay, so now that our artwork is super dry, I'm going to go back in and just focus on some of the shadows. So I'm going to take this Indanthro Blue 247. This is the blue that we used around the eye, and this just has a little bit more of a purpley undertone. So it'll kind of stand out in some of our shadow areas on the blues here. So it's sort of, you know, a little bit on the top part of these areas, and then a little bit more on the blue, on the bottom, on the blue. More of on the bottom, kind of around, and then it's still like that other blue in the center of it, if that makes sense. Some of them down here where we've got a more pronounced shadow are a little bit more shadowy on the bottom part and just a little bit on the top. So I'm still not pushing hard, even though I'm going in to do some of these shadow areas. I'm still just pushing light enough for the color to show up, really. And then this is pretty dark back here. I'm going to take this color over here, just sort of on the bottom part. And just a little bit in the crease here, just to make it even richer and darker. Okay. Then I'm going to come in with the Burnt Sienna 283, and I'm going to use this around some of his toes. So where I can see it's a little bit darker, I'm going to use this color to kind of darken up. Some of these shadows kind of come up onto his toes a little bit. And I find this burnt sienna color works really well with oranges. So again, I'm kind of like going around the sides, giving it that like round look. And I kind of like the overall light, like watercolor, like colors that we've got going on here. But if you want to go in and make anything darker, then you certainly can do that. So if you want to layer up on the orange again and make that a little bit brighter, you can, but I kind of like these kind of soft colors. So I'm sort of making like these little V's here because it's sort of where the, in between the toes kind of goes down a little bit. We've got like a few little lines here that we can put in with some darker green, just where the creases are. I'm just going to glaze a little bit of this kind of up the back here. I'm just glazing ever so lightly the bottom side of his leg there. So here it's a little bit blurry in the photo reference, so I'm sort of just making it up, but I know I want to get like those shadows in here. Just like in the other feet, so that's what I'm doing. Then I'm going to go in with that green, permanent green olive 167. And I'm going to start getting some darker areas in here. So just create a very light shadow, kind of between this eye and the other eye in here. And I'm just bringing this down the nose a little bit. And then we've got a much darker shadow coming along here. And then I'm just going to glaze a little bit of this, sort of like in the, right along here where I can see it's a little bit more green and this is a little bit more like yellowy green. So there's sort of like an area where it kind of comes along like this and then kind of comes down the back area. I don't want to get rid of all of the yellow green there, but just have a few areas where it's a bit different. Same here, I'm just going to bring this color kind of down the middle of his leg. And I can just start to create some of these little lines here. I'm going to focus this color on the bottom part of his leg here. where I can see there's a hint of the shadow. Same where I put that burnt sienna color, I'm just going to throw this over top of it. I think that's where I see that color. Then I'm going to come in with my warm gray 6 275. I'm going to start working on the other major shadow areas and just a few other areas. So I'm going to come along where I can kind of see his mouth. And then I'm going to get more shadow in down here. And there's just a very light thin line between the mouth and the shadow areas, and then it kind of comes together here. So because we use this color in the rest of our shadow areas, it's going to look like it belongs. And I'm also going to come over here in this bottom part of the yellow spot and just really get this shadowed up. I'm even going to take this right over some of the blue areas too. Sort of like keeping it in the bottom third of it. And this part's quite dark, so I'm going to come right over this. And I'm going to come over on the bottom part of the eye here. And now right where it's the darkest, I am just pushing ever so slightly darker. I'm pushing ever so slightly harder just to create a nice crisp line there. But we'll still blend that out a little bit. And I am going to come back with that blue, and I'm just going to start getting his eye in. So this is the Andanthrone Blue 247. I'm going to get the shape of his eye in. It kind of just ever so slightly curves this way. And then it's just slightly bigger in the middle of it. And then I'm going to take this warm gray and just come right over top of that. And I think I'm even going to come right over top of the shadow area again, just because I want this to be a little bit darker. And I may even go in and darken this leaf up now that I'm starting to get some of the darker colors in. I feel like that could go a little bit darker as well. And again, even though I want this to be darker, I'm not pushing any harder because it will just blend over nicely over top of this. I'm just looking at any of these areas just to see if they need to be any darker. Those ones are pretty light up there. This one could go just a little bit darker. And same here. Now this one I'm going to stick a little bit closer to the legs because it does get slightly lighter as it gets a little further from the legs. This one's about the same opaqueness. And then I'm going to get this little shadow in here. I'm just doing a tiny little shadow under there, maybe a little bit right here. I'm just kind of looking overall now to see if there's any areas that need to be a little bit darker. So there is this green area here that could go a little bit darker. Just got a couple little lines there. I might just take this May green and just go over his back here again, since we're going to be blending this out anyway. And I might just do a little bit on the legs here, just a little bit. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and blend all of this out again. And some of this is just more subtle, and some of it's going to be a little bit more pronounced shadows. So you can really do as many layers as you need to. If it's too much, just go and wipe it off. So I'm kind of just sticking with the leg areas right now. And I might just pick a little bit of that color up over the orange, or we can even glaze some of that color back over the orange there. If you find it's just a little too much. And I'm just softening out some of these areas where it's just too much. So I'm just carefully blending around areas. And then I just kind of lightly wipe off onto the paper towel here when I need to blend stuff out or soften it out even more. Sorry, I got a little itch there. I'm just going to blend this out, and I'm sort of blending it down into that darker area. And then I just soften any lines out. And I'm going to blend this shadow area in here. And I'm going to work on the blue ones. And I'm going to work on these shadows underneath. Need just a little bit more flow there just to blend it a little bit nicer. Maybe I'll even just go in and just smooth that out a little bit more. So I'm always trying to blend towards the darker areas. And I feel like I could even take a little bit of this gray, and that's pretty dry now. There is quite a shadow that kind of comes down under this green area. kind of right behind the eye. And there's this little half circle here. And just a little bit more on the upper lip there. Just tap that off and I'll just get that in again because I made it a little bit too big. To this. There, just softening that ever so lightly. So I'm gonna get in some of his little spots right now, and then I think I'll darken up this leaf down here. But I'm gonna take this burnt umber 280, and because a lot of the spots that I can see are a little bit more like on the warm brown side. So I'm just gonna get them in. So they're just like little uneven little dots, little areas. Some of them are a little bigger than others, some are little tiny spots. You don't have to get them all in. You can just get a few of the bigger ones and a few of the smaller ones. I think I put in the line art some of the bigger ones. Then you can kind of just add in a few of the smaller ones here and there. And try not to make them the same size or the same shape. You know, make sure you kind of give each of them like a little different curve or a little, you know, some not as dark as others. Now the ones down here we're probably going to have to go over with our warm gray 6 just because they're going to be quite dark. And I'm just getting a few little lines in here too, just indicating some of that like textured skin. So I'm not, you know, really trying to get these right in the exact same spot, but I'm just trying to, you know, get a few here and there. Yeah, he's got a couple of big spots right there and there. And try to make like the little patterns that you're doing, like don't put them all in the same area, do a few and then kind of a few in another area to kind of space them out. Okay, like that. And we'll go ahead and we'll add the highlights once we're done, but I definitely want to darken up this leaf just a little bit. So I'm going to take the Chrome Oxide Green 278, and I'm actually going to use my Caren palette here, and I might zoom out just a little bit so you guys can see what I'm doing. So I apologize there. Maybe I'll put this over on this side because I have more room. But basically what the Caren palette is it got a textured surface, so you can lay color down and then pick it up like watercolor. However, you could do like we did at the first part where I laid this color down, and then you can just kind of blend it out. But just to make it go a little bit quicker, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay this color down and then just pick it up like watercolor. Now, if you don't have this, you can also do it on the side of your masking tape, and I show you that in the techniques part of this series. So I'm actually going to grab my water brush, and I'm just going to have to get a little bit of water here real quick. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this wet. And I've got my cloth over here too that I can kind of dab it off a little bit. You can also use a paper towel. And I'm just going to pick this up just like watercolor. And then I may need to add more as we go. Just going to get enough water for it to flow pretty good. And I'm just going to start getting this on. And I'm going to kind of cover a couple of spots here, and then I'm going to just go back and kind of blend it out. And because I'm darkening these areas, I want to darken the light areas too, just a smidgen, just because then there's a little too much contrast in some of them. So that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to pick up a little bit of color. I've got to be careful around some of these areas just in case, you know, some of our darker areas weren't completely blended out. So I'm just lightly glazing that color over the lighter areas, and I hope you can see the difference there between like here and here. It's just going to make our frog pop a little bit more, I think. So I'm just going to lay some more of this color down. I don't want to go over top of the wet area again, just because then that's going to make our lead a little bit more brittle and a little more prone to breaking. Again, just pick up enough water to kind of get this blended out. That might be just a little bit too dark, so I'll kind of just take it on the side there. Now this is still going to dry a little bit lighter, so don't worry if it seems too dark right away. And if you go over the area, you can just take your water brush and just push that back, just dab it off. And if I've got a little bit too much water on my brush, just dab it off. Need just a little bit more water there. Okay, so I've got to get, whoop, and I'm throwing my pencil around. I think just one more area here. There we go. Grab some water. Just a little bit more than that. I don't want it too dark. Might even just darken up in here just a little bit more. Whoops, and I just put my hand in the other wet spot, so be careful of that. And I'm doing it again, so I'm going to put this up here. That was a bad idea to put it over there. Then I'm just going to soften this edge. Oh, I guess I can take my water brush and do that because that's a little bit cleaner. And you can just really do this as much as you need to get it as dark as you need to. Just a little bit more water. So I'm just seeing if there's any areas that I could darken up with whatever's left over. But I think I like that a little bit better. I could even just do a smidge in here. There. So I think I quite like that. And then we'll just go in and do some highlights, and then I think I'm going to call him done, or her. I don't know if this is a little girl frog or a little boy frog. Let me know in the comments down below. Do you guys know how to tell them between a boy and a girl? Because I certainly don't. Okay, so for our white areas, we have a few different options. You could use just white gouache, whatever gouache that you have. I like the Inktense block quite a bit, but because you can control it a little bit better, if you just do one layer, it's a little bit less opaque. If you layer it up, then you can get it a little bit more opaque. But just be aware with the Inktense block here, the white one, it starts off more transparent, and then as it dries, it gets more opaque. So sometimes you first lay it down and you're like, oh, that hardly shows up. We'll just give it like a minute or two to dry, and then you'll notice that it becomes a little bit more opaque that way. Now the P.H. Martin's, Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, this is super opaque. So if I've got a really stark white area, like for instance, there's a little white area in the eye, you could use this, but I find for some of the other areas, it's a little bit too opaque and it looks weird on top of the watercolor pencil. This sort of blends in and you can't really tell the difference, especially when you're moving your paper. You don't get any shine or anything from this, but you can get a little bit of shine from the P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. But I'll show you guys how to use this as well. So usually I just use whatever's on the cap, and I'm just going to use my small water brush since I have this here. You could use whatever little brush that you have or a liner brush, and I just pick a little bit up on the tip, And then I tend to kind of go in a corner and wipe a little bit off because I just want a dab of it. I'm just going to make a little dab here where like the white of his eye would be. Then I kind of look to see, is there any other super opaque white areas? And I don't really see any like as opaque as that. So I'm going to put that away. You could get the same effect with your your white gouache, I mean. So then I'm going to wipe this off really well on my brush, just off on a piece of paper towel. I'm going to use this small brush, and I'm going to use my white Mi-Teintes block. And all I do is just put a little dab of water on there from the block, and then I kind of swish my brush in here until I get quite a bit. And then I can kind of use the side of it to dab off whatever I don't need. And then I kind of just look around and see where's my little white areas. So I can see a few little white areas on his feet. So I'm going to get some of these in. There's some little dots here and there on his feet, just from like where the light is reflecting. And some more highlights, and then I kind of just wipe on it when I need some more. So now you can see as it dries, it kind of dries a little bit opaque, so definitely less is more to start with. There's like a little white part here. And I find this is just really easy to control and to use. For me, just depends. I see sort of like this line coming up here. So I'm going to like lightly get that in, and then we can always come back. I get a few little areas over here. This nice little light highlight right around the blue area, right on the green here. But again, I'm going to do a little bit at first. And then if I'm running out of water, I can just add a little bit more water there. And then it just mixes a little bit better. Then I can see some little dots on his head here, so just going to get some of these in. Just where the light's reflecting. So like frogs have little bumps on them. And the light's just reflecting on some of those. Now you don't have to go crazy and get them all in, but just sort of like an indication that there's some here and there. Gonna come just under his lip here. It's a little bit lighter. Again, I'm just grabbing a little bit more where I need it. Right here on his mid back, there's quite a bit. It's kind of like following this little circular shape here. And then it comes down, so I'm avoiding that little brown spot there because there's no highlights on that. And these are a lot closer, a lot more concentrated, and then as it comes down, they tend to come out a little more spaced out. And then just kind of sparingly down the back a little bit. to come over this little area again here. And I hope you guys can see as they're drying, they're definitely drying a lot more opaque. I just want to get some little tiny ones right up in here. Just going to add a little bit more water again. Get some more of this a little bit more concentrated. And then just come in here again. If you find it's too much, you can kind of just dab it. Now there's just ever so slightly like a very light white line on the very bottom there. So I'm going to get that in. Then I'm just looking to see if there's any other areas, and I think it's pretty much all of the little highlight areas that I need to get in. Now you could do more, you could do less. I just do like a couple little more dots on his feet a little bit. And just make some of these a little bit more opaque. That's why I wait a few minutes, because some of them, if you've got a little bit more on your brush, they come out like pop, like a real bright highlight. But I think that's it for that. You can, you know, do more or less. And I'm just going to come back in with that gray pencil, sort of the warm gray 6. And the little spots that are down here, I'm just going to come over top and just darken up, and like underneath these little lines, just a little bit of a shadow there. And I'm trying to keep my hand out of the way so you guys can see. Then I'm just looking to see if any of these bigger spots need to be a little bit darker. There is one in here, but that's pretty dark, so we'll do it with this one. And I think that's it. I think that's where I want to leave this little guy. So like I said, you guys could work on more details or less details, whatever you prefer. But I think I like him like this. So I'm going to go ahead and take the tape off. Now, if you find that you have trouble with your paper ripping when you take the tape off, this is masking tape. This has been on for a few days now, but if you notice that it's ripping, you can always take your heat tool and just go around the edges and heat it up a little bit, and that just releases the tackiness of the tape. And I always end up pulling the tape away from my work, because if it were to rip, I would rather it rip out than to rip into the work here. And I really like how the background turned out in this. We got a really nice blend. And it's sort of, the tape's ripping down there, so I'm just gonna come from this side. Now, if I would have left this on the board until it like completely dries, it wouldn't stay warped like this. But I do have a video that I did maybe like a year ago or something like that, how to flatten your paper out. So I'll try to link that down below. But you can also, you know, stack it between some books or something, and it'll flatten over time. But I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I'm just going to move it a little bit so that you can see with the Inktense blocks, you don't really get like that shininess, or I can't see it anyway. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and let me know in the comments down below if you're going to follow along, or if you did follow along and if you found this useful. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.